What if the Predator wasn't a towering, mandible-faced hunter, but was instead a 5'9" Jean-Claude Van Damme in a rubber suit that looked like a giant kickboxing ant? Or what if the film wasn't called Predator at all, but was titled Hunter, and featured an alien coming to Earth to hunt several different species? Believe it or not, all of these things nearly happened. To find out how we went from a martial arts alien to the movie we got, let's dive in and take a look at what could have been Predator. In 1985, a joke started circulating around Hollywood that Rocky Balboa had run out of earthly opponents. So after defeating the Russian super soldier Ivan Drago in Rocky IV, the punchline was that if another Rocky movie were made, Rocky would have to fight an alien. While most people laughed, screenwriters Jim and John Thomas took the idea seriously and used that questionable gag as the inspiration for a screenplay initially titled Hunter. With no track record and no credibility in Hollywood, the Thomas brothers couldn't get anyone to read their script. Out of options, they literally slid it under the door of Fox producer Michael Levy. Levy brought it to producer Joel Silver, who, fresh off Commando, recognized the pulpy sci-fi premise as a foundation for a large-scale studio blockbuster. However, in the original draft, the alien looked nothing like the icon we know today. It didn't wear a helmet, it bled orange blood instead of glowing green, and the story was much more convoluted. The original concept was a study on what it meant to be hunted, featuring a band of aliens coming to Earth to hunt several different species. But the writers eventually realized that concept was way too complex for an action movie, so they decided to strip it down to the most dangerous creature of all, man, and the most dangerous man, a combat soldier, setting the film in Central America, where the US was heavily involved in operations at the time. Even the title had to change because there was already a popular TV series called Hunter, so the name was switched to Predator. The dynamic of the squad was also completely different, which featured just the hero, Major Alan Schaefer, facing off against the alien alone. However, when Schwarzenegger read the script, he felt the Predator needed to seem more lethal, and suggested that instead of a one-on-one duel, the creature should pick off an elite team of highly trained commandos one by one. The opening of the movie was also originally much more intense, with director John McTiernan wanting the team to arrive in the jungle via a halo jump rather than a helicopter. The scene would have shown the team's plane coming under fire from an enemy MiG, and as the pilot tried to flee the combat zone, Dutch would have held a gun to the pilot's head, forcing him to fly over the landing zone before leaping out of the back ramp and grabbing a parachute midair. Speaking of McTiernan, he wasn't the studio's first choice to direct. The first person approached was Jeff Murphy, a filmmaker dubbed the New Zealand Spielberg. A few years prior, Murphy had interviewed for a job directing a Conan the Barbarian sequel, but during the interview with Schwarzenegger, Murphy made the fatal mistake of jokingly calling the character Conan the Librarian. Needless to say, Arnold didn't find it funny, so Murphy was out. Then, producer John Davis remembered a low-budget film he had recently saw called Nomads, made for a limited budget, directed by John McTiernan. McTiernan's atmospheric direction and ability to make the film on a cheap budget is what won him the job. However, even with the director locked in, the script still needed work, and since the producers were running out of money for a professional polish, they hired Lethal Weapon writer Shane Black as an actor so they could get him to do double duty and also rewrite the script while on location. However, Black refused to touch the script once he arrived, insisting he was hired as an actor, not a writer. Since he wouldn't do the rewrite, the filmmakers decided he was expendable and killed his character first in order to send him home. But the biggest disaster of the production was the creature itself, which began with the casting of a then unknown Jean-Claude Van Damme. At the time, Van Damme was desperate for work, constantly coming into casting director Jackie Birch's office and jumping up in the air to show off his moves. Birch eventually recommended him to producer Joel Silver, telling him that Van Damme would be great as the Predator because nobody moved like him. When Van Damme met Silver at a hotel, he reportedly walked up to the producer, jumped into the air, and did a split, with his crotch at eye level, a move that impressed Silver enough to land him the role. However, Van Damme had a fundamental misunderstanding of what he was signing up for. He thought he would be the star of the film, showcasing his martial arts abilities to the world with his face clearly visible, not realizing he was essentially just a stuntman under a suit. Designed by Boss Film Studios, the first version of the Predator costume looked nothing like the terrifying hunter we now know. It was a disproportionate, ungainly creature with large yellow eyes and a dog-like head, as the crew described as looking like a giant rubber chicken or an ant. After trying it on the first time, Van Damme was so mad that his face wasn't going to be seen that he took the $20,000 head off and threw it to the ground in anger, damaging it. Van Damme would then have have to be convinced to stay aboard. Eventually, he'd reluctantly agree. His working conditions, however, were brutal, with the actor forced to wear a thick felt suit that covered his whole body in temperatures reaching 100 degrees, causing him to pass out from dehydration twice. Joel Silver warned him that if he passed out one more time, he'd be fired, to which Van Damme replied, "I'm not doing it on purpose." To make matters worse, one version of the suit was bright red, a specific technical choice because red is the opposite of green on the color wheel, which was necessary for the special effects team to create the optical illusion of the cloaking device against the jungle background. So instead of being a cool sci-fi warrior, Van Damme found himself running around the jungle in a bright red lobster suit that made him feel absolutely ridiculous. Another issue is that once Van Damme got into the costume and stood next to his co-stars, the filmmakers realized he was the wrong height. Standing under 6 feet tall, they realized the Predator needed to be of greater stature to look threatening against such massive co-stars on bodybuilding regimens like Schwarzenegger, Jesse Ventura, and Carl Weathers. Additionally, the filmmakers wanted him to move like an alien and hop around like a frog, but Van Damme insisted on kickboxing to show off his moves, convinced that was the only way people would know it was him. The situation reached a boiling point in Joel Silver's trailer when the producer told him to stop kickboxing because the Predator isn't a kickboxer. Van Damme refused to back down, and when Silver told him he was fired, Van Damme shouted, "Kiss my balls," and walked out. Even if he hadn't quit, his days were numbered. When the studio saw the dailies of a short stuntman in a red suit, they hated it, thinking it looked like a rat, and demanded he be replaced. In fact, Fox would shut down the production after seeing the disastrous footage. But after the editors cut together the scene of the commandos, the studios realized they had a potential hit on their hands if only they could fix the alien. Schwarzenegger recommended his friend Stan Winston, the creature wizard behind the Terminator, to design a new Predator. The inspiration for the new look came from a painting of a Rastafarian warrior in Joel Silver's office, which led Winston to design the creature with quills that looked like dreadlocks. Later, while sketching ideas on a plane ride next to James Cameron, the Aliens director suggested he had always wanted to see a creature with mandibles, which Winston added to create the iconic face we now know today. To replace the 5'9" Van Damme, they hired Kevin Peter Hall, a 7'2" giant who had just finished playing the Sasquatch in Harry and the Hendersons. Winston and his team had only 6 weeks to build the new suit, a near impossible deadline that caused a mini revolt among his crew, but they pulled it off as a favor to Arnold. However, Hall had issues with the new costume. The mask left him virtually blind, forcing him to rehearse without it and commit every movement and step to memory. The production hiatus on the film ultimately proved to be a major advantage, giving the filmmakers 2 full months rather than the planned 2 weeks to refine the film's nail-biting, dialogue-free man versus monster climax, as a lone surviving commando Dutch attempts to outwit the intergalactic hunter. However, the ending was almost completely different. In the original script, Dutch physically bested the alien while camouflaged in mud, leaving the Predator to drop his weapon and flee for a ship. Dutch would then pick up the alien's otherworldly weapon and chase it down, firing at the spacecraft as the Predator tried to escape, blowing it up and killing the hunter. The film would have ended with the chopper seeing the explosion and coming down to pick up Dutch. While the creature itself was a disaster, the human element of the production was just as chaotic, fueled by a cast of massive egos and dangerous personalities. One of the most bizarre safety measures on set involved Sonny Landham, the actor who played the stoic tracker Billy. Landham was known for having a short temper and getting into bar fights, so the insurance company refused to bond the film unless the studio hired a bodyguard for him. However, the twist was that the bodyguard wasn't there to protect Sonny from other people, he was specifically hired to protect the cast and crew from Sonny. However, the crew had other problems, as most of them would suffer from traveler's diarrhea due to the water in the hotel they were staying at. The atmosphere of testosterone-fueled aggression extended to the rest of the cast as well, leading to a secret war over who had the biggest muscles. Jesse Ventura, who played Blaine, discovered from the wardrobe department that his arms measured 1 inch larger than Arnold's. Ecstatic, Ventura bet Arnold a bottle of champagne that his arms were bigger, which Arnold accepted instantly. However, when they measured, Arnold won easily, as it turned out that Arnold had rigged the whole thing by telling the wardrobe department to lie to Ventura about the measurements just to bait him into the bet so he could crush him publicly. Arnold also had his gym equipment shipped over so he could train every day, while many of his co-stars would secretly wake up as early as 3 a.m. to work out before filming began. Carl Weathers would pretend his physique was effortless and just genetics, but would time his workouts so none of the other actors would catch him training. The Predator's famous heat vision was another high-tech idea that failed on set. Because the jungle was over 90 degrees, the thermal cameras couldn't distinguish the actor's body heat from the hot trees, rendering everyone invisible on the thermal camera used for the Predator's POV. To fix this, the filmmakers had to artificially create a temperature contrast, and they did this by spraying the trees in background with ice water to cool them down, so that the actors would register on the camera. It's hard to imagine that one of the greatest sci-fi action movies of all time came so close to being a disaster. disaster, featuring a kickboxing red lizard that looks straight out of a B-movie. Instead, thanks to a mid-production pivot, Stan Winston's genius, and the removal of the muscles from Brussels, aka Jean-Claude Van Damme, Predator became a genre-defining classic, as sometimes the best thing that can happen to a movie is for everything to go wrong. Thanks for watching, everybody, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more of Hollywood's untold stories and unmade movies.